Yes, sir.
Genesis 2:21, we read that God took a rib from Adam, and the verse ends with, and he closed up the flesh instead thereof. Now, there's an implication there of instead of what? And that would be my question, and also why.
Just more just a matter of Old English and use of the words. We use the word instead in the sense of something in the place of something else. And it isn't used quite like that here. There's several places in the Bible like that, but the Old English, I hate to say this, is a little bit misleading. But it doesn't mislead you in anything it's of any importance. Let me show you one. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, whoever believes in him should not perish, but might. See? And of course, it doesn't mean that. It's a simple future. The should there is a simple future. In the future, they're not going to perish. That's just usage of English. Let me show another one. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. How come it isn't who? Well, it told me one time, well, who is a people and which is a thing, so it couldn't be which for things. I said, which one of you told you that? See, which does refer to people. Over in 1 John chapter 1, he says, that which our eyes have seen, that which our hands have handled, that which, and he's talking about Christ. All right, 21, the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept and took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And he closed up the flesh in place of leaving an open hole there. He took one of the ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the thing is, he's doing this in place of leaving the thing open. He took one of his ribs out, and when he did, he had to open the flesh to do it. And then so in place of the open place, he closed it back up again. That's all there is that. It isn't instead of something else in the body. And that rib he takes out is a fifth rib. It caused Adam to die. Adam has to die for his ribs, the fifth rib. A fellow said to me one time, he said, you Christian, ridiculous Christians won't accept evolution and believe that God made a man out of a rib. And I said, you ridiculous evolutionists believing God made a man out of an amoeba. What a thing. At least in the rib you got the same components in the human body. What have you got in an amoeba? You haven't even got any sex in the amoeba. It's a one-cell animal. I think the man came from an amoeba or a dinosaur. You go about a fairy story. I was on San Antonio when a fellow phoned up and he said, you talking about vestigial organs, what are they good for? He said, how do you explain the nipples on a man's breast when he doesn't, give suck to children? And, I had to answer that. And I bluffed through as best I could. I had some pretty good material on the semi-planaris around the eye, and the earlobe and the appendix and the tonsil. They didn't have something right on that, see. And I mentioned the fact maybe it's a mark about what he's going to be instead of what he's been. And I hadn't been off the air 15 minutes and a nurse phoned up there and said the reason why that is, she said at a certain stage in the embryo when the sex of the embryo has not been determined yet. And that part is developed before the sex is developed, so the nipples are there before it's determined whether it's a male or female. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right, something else. Nothing like a Bible to clear up a college education.